A sudden storm. Realistic fiction. It started as a beautiful day for a hike. Nikki and her dad set out on a trail that wound through the woods behind their house. They were hiking to a farm nearby to watch the farmers care for their animals. The sun climbed higher in the sky as Nikki and her father walked. A nearby stream looked so inviting that they dipped their feet in to cool off. They got to the farm just before feeding time for the animals. Nikki pointed at a goat. "That one is so greedy! He's eating all the feed." "I think it's feeding time for us, too," Dad joked. The two of them unpacked their sandwiches and sat at a picnic table to eat. After lunch, they spent some more time on the farm. Then the sun began to lower in the sky. "We should leave before it gets too late," Dad said. "On hot, sticky days like this, we often get thunderstorms by evening." Sure enough, dark clouds were present in the sky by the time they got home. They went inside to wait for the storm to pass. "Lightning mostly strikes taller things," Dad explained. "That's why it's wise to stay away from trees during a storm." Outside, the wind howled and lightning lit the dark sky. A branch snapped off a tree and blew across the yard. "I see what you mean," Nikki said. Loud thunder sounded in the distance, and it made Nikki jump. Before long, it thundered again, but this time, she wasn't as scared. All of a sudden, Nikki saw her dog Button dash under the couch in a blur of fur. Dad laughed. "Button isn't quite as brave as you are."
The cable car is coming! Historical fiction. It was August 2nd, 1873, and Anna stood with her mother on Clay Street. They were not alone. A crowd of people from all over San Francisco was waiting too. Like Anna, they wanted to ride the city's first cable car. As Anna looked at the people around her, a frown went across her face. She started to worry that she would never find a space in the cable car. A minute later, Anna heard the bell. Clang, clang! That was the signal that the cable car was coming. A wire cable buried deep underground pulled it up the hill. The car would cross Webster Street, then the grip, or conductor, would turn a giant screw to bring the vehicle to a stop. People started to move, and Anna could see the car for the first time. The car was bigger than she expected, and it was shaped like a box with flat sides. It had steps down to the ground and no wheels. The windows were open to let in fresh air. Some riders could sit on a bench along the sides or back. There were poles every few feet for other riders to hold onto as they stood. Anna and her mother squeezed into the front of the car. From there, they watched the grip release the brake. Their ride began. In all, Anna would travel up and down Clay Street for just over a half mile and cross about 10 city blocks. After the ride, Anna was so excited that she wanted more adventure. She told her mother, "Tomorrow, let's hop on a train, walk across a bridge, or ride a boat."
What makes waves? Magazine article. Imagine walking on the beach. You feel the warm sand and a seashell beneath your feet. After a while, you sit and look at the ocean. A boat on the water rises and falls. Water rolls into the shore. It makes you wonder, what makes waves? A wave is a moving ridge on the surface of a large body of water. Wind causes most waves. As wind blows over water, it gives some of its energy to the water. A small amount of wind makes a tiny wave. A strong wind can make a really big wave. Try it yourself by blowing over the top of a pan of water. Because of the way waves seem to stack on each other, you might get the idea that the water moves forward. In fact, the water only moves up and down. You can see this motion by watching a rowboat or buoy. These objects will bob up and down with the wave, but they do not move toward or away from the shore. When a wave near the shore breaks, the top tips over and finally crashes onto the beach. Wind is not the only thing that causes waves to form. Sometimes, earthquakes and volcanic eruptions happen underwater. They can cause special kinds of very long, high waves. These giant waves rush away from the center of the action of the earthquake or volcano. You can make a model of these waves in a tub or pool. Put your arms straight out. Pull them apart and push them together again quickly. Watch how the water moves away in waves. What makes waves? Wind, earthquakes, and volcanoes do.
A Midnight Rainbow. Informational fiction. Lily and Jonah could not wait for spring break. All week they talked about their trip. In a few days, they would arrive in Alaska to see the Northern Lights, a natural display of glowing colors in the night sky. Even though their parents had shown them pictures of the Northern Lights, Lily and Jonah still weren't sure exactly what to expect. "How can rainbow colors appear in the dark?" Jonah asked. "You'll just have to wait and see," Mom answered. "As long as we have good weather in Alaska, we should get a great show." "I think this is the first time I'm not hoping for a snowstorm," Lily laughed. "That's why we're going in March," Dad said. "It's not summer yet, so the sky still gets dark enough for us to see the Northern Lights. However, it won't be as cold and snowy as it would be in the winter." That weekend, the family flew to Fairbanks, Alaska. There was some winter snow still on the ground, but skies were clear. Even in March, it felt cold to Lily and Jonah, especially at night. They wore winter coats and sipped hot chocolate as they waited and waited for the Northern Lights. It was almost midnight when a faint glow appeared where the land met the sky. Slowly, the light grew and rose higher. It seemed to float right above the trees. Soon the sky was painted with enormous swirls of green and yellow. Jonah was so amazed that he could barely speak. "Awesome," he said in an excited whisper.
Pineapple pancakes. Recipe, how to. How would you like to nibble on your very own taste of the rainforest? One fruit that you know is actually grown there. It's the pineapple. This juicy fruit is popular and good for you. It can be added to a fruit salad or even cooked with meat. In some cultures, this fancy fruit has become known as a sign of welcome. On a tropical island, you may see pineapples on display in a hotel, inn, or other place that visitors go. One simple and fun way to enjoy pineapple is to make pineapple pancakes. Here is a recipe. It will take you less than 1 hour to make and eat the pancakes. As any recipe will warn you, be sure to read the instructions carefully and always cook with an adult. Pineapple fruit is bright yellow, but the pancakes will be pale in color. You can put more pineapple on your pancakes before eating them. Be sure to chew slowly to enjoy every fruity bite. How to make pineapple pancakes. This recipe makes 8 4-inch round pancakes. The ingredients you'll need are 1 1/4 cup flour, 3 teaspoons of baking powder, 1 tablespoon sugar, 1/2 teaspoon salt, 1 egg beaten, 1 cup of milk, 2 tablespoons of oil, and 1/2 cup crushed pineapple, drained. Mix the flour, baking powder, sugar, and salt in a bowl. In another bowl, mix the egg, milk, and oil. Stir this mixture into the first mixture. The batter will be lumpy. Stir in the pineapple. Lightly grease a griddle or pan and heat it. Drop large spoonfuls of batter onto the griddle or pan. Turn over each pancake when the underside is golden brown. Cook until the other side is also golden brown.
Why bears have short tails. Folktale. Many years ago, Bear had a long, fluffy tail. Every morning she would boast, "I think my tail looks so very pretty today." The other forest animals were too weak to stand up to her. Instead, they could only agree. "It's a nice tail," Rabbit and Chipmunk would say in gentle voices. Then, one cold winter day, Fox had a clever idea. He was famous for being tricky. Fox asked all the animals to help him catch lots of fish. Then, he found a spot where he could sit on the frozen pond and put all the fish around him. He knew Bear would come by to search for food. Fox sat on the ice and waited. Up above, the bare winter branches blew in the brisk wind. At last, Bear arrived. She licked her lips and came over to Fox. "How did you catch so many fish?" Bear asked. "I used my tail," Fox said. "I bet you'd catch even more with your lovely tail. Try it here. This is the best spot for fishing." Bear made a hole in the icy pond and dipped her tail in the dark, cold water. Fox rubbed his paws together. "Tonight, we'll have a fish feast." "We?" chuckled Bear. "You mean I'll have a fish feast tonight?" Fox shrugged. "Whatever you say. You're the leader of this forest." Bear sat on the ice for a long time. She sat so long that she fell asleep. When she woke hours later, she didn't notice that her tail had frozen into the ice. She tugged hard at her tail, and part of it snapped off. "My beautiful tail!" Bear cried, running off in shame. From then on, Fox was a hero in the forest. The forest animals didn't have to hear about Bear's tail ever again.
Be an outdoor detective. Magazine article. In the animal world around us, there are lots of small creatures waiting for you to discover. Many of these critters belong to the insect family. All insects have 3 main body parts and 6 legs. However, insects come in all shapes, sizes, and colors. They can be found anywhere, from a dry desert to a damp swamp. Some insects are so small that you may need a tool such as a hand lens to see them. Other insects have features that make them easy to find. For example, you can easily see a colorful butterfly on a plant, and you will know it when a bee is buzzing like an alarm near your ear. Many insects are quite busy at work. When butterflies and bees land on flowers, their bodies often pick up a powder called pollen. Then, when they fly to other flowers, they scatter the pollen. This helps create more plants. Sometimes, insects work as a team. Ants are a good example. Ants work in groups called colonies. A single colony may have hundreds or even thousands of ants in it. Together, the ants work to build anthills and tunnels in soil or sand. These places give the ants a place to stay safe. Ants also work together to collect pieces of plants or food crumbs that people leave behind. Then the ants carry this food back to the anthill. Ants can even carry pieces of food that are bigger than their bodies. Are you ready to start exploring? Pay attention to where you step and look closely at leaves and dirt. You may see some interesting insects.
Yellowstone National Park. Magazine article. Yellowstone National Park is our country's first national park. It is a large park. Parts of it are in 3 states: Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho. The park is famous for its natural wonders, such as waterfalls, hot springs, and geysers. There are many reasons to visit Yellowstone National Park. One is to see the many geysers. A geyser is a natural hot spring that sprays steam and hot water into the air. The most famous geyser is Old Faithful. It can prove to you that it deserves its name. About every 90 minutes, Old Faithful blasts a steady stream of boiling water high into the sky. Another reason to visit the park is to see hot springs and thick mud pots. The mud pots are pools of hot, muddy water. Don't dive in, though. Some are as hot as boiling water. Yellowstone is home to many animals. You may be able to get a close look at a herd of wild bison, sometimes called buffalo, from your car. Many years ago, hunters were an enemy of the bison. Now the bison in the park are protected. Elk, moose, bears, and wolves are among the other animals that live in Yellowstone. Eagles too soar through its skies. Visitors should remember not to bother, feed, or frighten the animals in the park. People can walk on the park's many miles of smooth walking trails. People can also camp, boat, and horseback ride. Visitors should pack a map, water, and camera. It is a good idea to seal the camera in a plastic bag to protect it from water. Yellowstone has many amazing things to see. No wonder over 60 million people have visited this special place.
Field Day. Personal narrative. I love to play sports at any time of the year. I'll even shiver through a soccer game in November. My favorite sports day of all is field day. It takes place during the last week of school. Everyone in school is on one of 4 teams. I am on the blue team. Our teachers set up all the games before we get to school. They must wake up at dawn. They also make sure everyone is fair and plays by the rules. Yesterday, my favorite day was finally here. I couldn't wait to play and cheer for my team. The first event of the day was an obstacle course. We had to hop through tires, run around cones, and crawl through a tube. I ran into trouble early. My foot got stuck in one of the tires. I tripped and let out a loud cry of pain. Luckily, the fall didn't do much harm. I just scraped my elbow. Soon, I was ready for the next event, the potato race. Each set of partners was given a potato on a spoon to carry it back and forth across a long field of grass. To win, the partners had to go the entire way without dropping the potato. Each person had to stay calm and walk carefully. It's easy for the potato to fall off of the spoon. During my turn, I could see the potato tremble on the spoon, but it didn't drop. When I reached the finish line, I saw my partner jumping up and down. We had won the race. Our win put our team in first place. I felt like a hero.
The Wright brothers. Biography. It is hard to believe that the first airplane with an engine flew just over 100 years ago. The hard work and clever thinking of Wilbur and Orville Wright made it happen. The Wright brothers took an early interest in flying. As children, they had a toy helicopter that made them curious about flight. When the helicopter broke, the boys built their own model. That showed them not to doubt their skill at making things. As adults, the brothers built bicycles, printing presses, and kites. They also liked to make gliders, which are planes without engines. In the 1890s, flying in gliders was dangerous. The Wright brothers were eager to make flying safer. They thought that an engine would give pilots more control. In 1900, Orville and Wilbur went to the windy village of Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. There, they kept testing new airplane designs. 3 years later, they had a model that worked. The plane was 16 feet wide and made of wood and cloth. It had a gas engine. The first flight took off on December 17, 1903. Orville would board the plane and squeeze tightly to hold on and control the plane. The engine would start with a screech. The plane flew in the air for 120 feet. The trip lasted 12 seconds and ended with a mild crash. There was some fear that the plane was damaged, but Wilbur flew it again a few hours later. You would have to leap for joy at the sight if you had been there. In 1905, the Wright brothers built an airplane that could fly for 30 minutes. On December 31, 1908, Wilbur flew a plane for a record-breaking 2 hours and 19 minutes. The Wright brothers kept working to build better airplanes.
Margaret Heffernan Borland, Trailblazer. Biography. In 1873, a brave Texas woman set out on a long and hard trip. Her name was Margaret Heffernan Borland. With her children and a small team of workers, Margaret led a herd of cattle from Victoria, Texas, to Wichita, Kansas. The herd had over 1,000 cattle. At the time, it was odd for a woman to lead a cattle drive. Margaret was one of the first women to do it. Many people at that time did not think it was proper for a woman to do such work. Margaret, however, was a strong woman. She did not care what others thought. She had a job to do. Margaret's trip was tense. It was not easy. A few years earlier, cattle drivers had to carve a trail through low mountains and land covered with small trees and bushes. The trail was still rough and dangerous. It was easy to get a scrape or worse. The tender skin of a hand or arm was no match for a thorny bush. As workers and herds of cattle traveled, the harsh sun could beam down one day. The next day, heavy rains could flood the trails. Margaret led a type of cattle called the Texas Longhorn. A Texas Longhorn steer had very good lean meat. These cattle could survive in rough places along the trail. Texas Longhorns, however, scared easily. A coyote howling from its den could cause them to run away in a sudden rush. The Texas Longhorns were hard to control, but Margaret made it to Wichita with most of her herd. Today, she is remembered for her independence and strength. A Dog with a Job. Informational fiction. My name is Penny, and I work as a guide dog. The label guide dog means that I help a person who is blind. I was born at Guide Dogs for the Blind in San Rafael, California. This is a place that trains puppies to be guide dogs. Years ago, the company had only one dog. The modern company of today trains hundreds of dogs every year. When I was 8 weeks old, Guide Dogs for the Blind had to select a family for me. The family gave me love and a stable home. The family members taught me good manners and how to obey commands like sit and lie down. They took me to many different places and they played with me. Some types of play were not proper for me and were not allowed. The family members could not pitch a ball or other object for me to catch and carry back to them. When I was 18 months old, I went back to Guide Dogs for the Blind to begin a special training program. To be honest, I was sad to leave my family. During my training, I wore a harness. I learned how to guide a person through a busy city. I even learned fun skills like how to ride on a steep escalator. I also learned how to take a trip on a train. 3 months later, I was ready to be a guide dog. I was matched with a partner, a woman who was blind. When we met, I took a minute to sniff her hand so that I could always identify her. We trained together for 3 weeks. Now, I have a job to do. I spend my days guiding her anywhere she wants to go. On weekends, we escape to the country and I spend lots of time playing. I love my job.
Goldilocks and the Bear Family. Fairy tale. Mama Bear, Papa Bear, and Little Bear lived in a big hollow tree in the forest. Papa Bear was an expert at cooking. One day, he made a very tasty soup. "While we wait for our soup to cool," Mama Bear said, "let's walk to the post office and mail this letter." Mama Bear wrote an address on the letter. Little Bear found a stamp. Soon after the bears left, a girl named Goldilocks walked down the forest path and right into their house. "Ooh, soup!" Goldilocks said in delight. She tasted from the first bowl. It was too hot. The second was too cold. The third was just right. And she ate the whole thing. Then Goldilocks went into the living room, where she saw 3 books. The first book was too long. The second was too short. Goldilocks picked up the third book. "This book is just long enough." Goldilocks read the first section of the book, but then it became difficult for her to stay awake. "I need to go relax," she yawned. Goldilocks tried the beds. Papa Bear's bed was too hard. Mama Bear's was too soft. Little Bear's was just perfect. When the bears got home, they could tell that someone had been there. They were not happy. "Someone bent the pages of my book," Little Bear cried. "And that person ate my soup, too!" Just then, the bears heard snoring. When they walked into the bedroom, Goldilocks woke up with a start. She tried to make an excuse. "I was just watching the house while you were gone," she stammered. The bears would not accept this. "You can't walk into someone's home without asking," they roared. "Please leave." Goldilocks dashed out quickly. She never bothered the bears again. One great way to travel. Magazine article. All aboard! All over the world, train travel is a major way for people to get around. Before there were trains, horse-drawn coaches and boats were the common ways for people to travel. Trains are much faster. They move on tracks made of steel rails. Trains also have railroad cars that attach to each other. This allows trains to carry many people at one time. Today, we also have cars, buses, and planes for travel. However, the train is still a big part of our lives. The United States has a very large railway system. It has enough track to circle the Earth 5 times. We are not the only country with these different ways of traveling. Other countries have similar ways to travel too. There are different kinds of trains. Some are commuter trains that people take to work every day. Commuter trains can fill up very quickly in the morning and early evening. These are the times when most people travel to and from work. Trains can be so crowded that people have to stand and hold on to a handle or a pole. Sometimes there's only room for a very slender person. Another kind of train takes people long distances. These trains sell only as many tickets as there are seats. That way, each passenger has a seat. Many trains that travel long distances have separate cars where people can eat and sleep. Some people prepare for long train rides by packing books to read or games to play. Other people like to spend the ride taking in the sights. If this is what you choose to do, simply sit back and admire the scenery. Your only task is to enjoy the ride.